I woke up on my kitchen floor with my hands taped together, and the smell of cleaning solution still sharp in the air. The chair was overturned beside me, and my phone was gone, which told me someone had taken their time. The front door was locked from the inside, and the windows were shut tight, which made the quiet feel intentional. A calendar lay open on the table, with red marks slashed across nearly every day like warnings that had been ignored. Today was the only square left clean and white, and at the bottom of the page, someone had written the day you came back. I did not scream because the apartment looked staged rather than broken. I pulled myself upright and noticed fresh trash bags by the door tied neatly, as if chores had just been finished. The first clear thought was that whoever did this knew me well enough to clean. I found a knife missing from the block and a towel missing from the rack. The sink was dry, even though I remembered leaving dishes overnight. I sat there staring at the calendar until the ticking clock sounded louder than it ever had. That moment on the floor was not the beginning, even though it felt like the worst part. 3 weeks earlier, I had returned to this apartment. After being gone for reasons I never explained to anyone. The neighbors said welcome back in the hallway with polite smiles that lasted a beat too long. I noticed then that my mailbox had been emptied carefully with no loose flyers. Inside the apartment, nothing was dusty, as if someone had been airing the place out. My fridge contained food I would normally buy, but did not remember purchasing. A single red mark was already on the calendar for the day before I arrived. I assumed it was old and left it there. That night, I slept without dreams and woke up to the sound of the shower running. The bathroom was empty when I checked, and the pipes were cold. I blamed the building and went to work. Each day after that, I noticed small corrections in my life, like lights turned off behind me and doors closed gently. I found my shoes aligned by the door when I knew I had kicked them off. A note appeared on my desk, reminding me to lock the window. I began to mark the calendar myself to track these moments. The red marks multiplied fast and filled the month. Every mark was for a day when something had been fixed or arranged without my memory of doing it. I stopped inviting friends over because the apartment felt occupied even when empty. I changed my routine and took different streets home. The changes did not slow. Groceries appeared in my bags that I had not paid for. My work emails were drafted before I sat down to write them. I tested the situation by leaving a glass on the counter with a crack. The next morning it was gone and replaced with a new one. I checked my bank account and found charges that matched the new items exactly. I began recording myself at night with an old camera. The footage showed me sleeping without movement. At exactly 3 in the morning, the recording stopped each night. I replaced the camera and hid it. The same thing happened again. I stopped sleeping at home for 2 nights and stayed with a friend. When I returned, the bed was neatly made, and the calendar had 2 new red marks. confronted the empty apartment out loud and received silence that felt practiced. I considered leaving again, but something about the order kept me there. I started to think the apartment was correcting me rather than haunting me. I told myself there was an explanation grounded in routine and stress. The red marks kept spreading until only one day remained untouched. That day was today, and I had no memory of writing the message at the bottom. I tried to recall when I last saw the calendar clean and failed. The handwriting on the page matched mine down to the pressure on the pen. I searched my laptop history and found documents I had never opened. Each file was a daily log written in my voice, describing actions taken to maintain stability. The logs mentioned cleaning solutions and restraint tape without drama. They described locking doors from the inside to prevent interruption. One entry said the return required preparation. Another entry said memory would interfere. I slammed the laptop shut and checked the trash bags by the door. Inside were old clothes of mine, cut into strips. There were also expired medications I did not remember being prescribed. I checked the bathroom cabinet and saw empty spaces where bottles should have been. The mirror had been cleaned recently, and the steam marks formed a square as if someone stood there every night. I noticed a small cut on my wrist, already healing. There was no bandage in sight, but the cut was clean. I searched the apartment and found the missing phone powered off inside a drawer. The last video recorded on it showed me speaking calmly to the camera. I said the plan required separation and control. I said the calendar was necessary to keep track of progress. I said today would be different because I would be present again. I did not recognize the certainty in my voice. The video ended with me placing the phone in the drawer. I felt time narrow into tasks as I replayed the weeks backward. The notes on my desk were all written at night. The groceries matched recipes saved on my laptop titled Recovery Meals. The charges on my bank account matched dates with red marks. I realized the red marks were not warnings, but confirmations. Each mark meant the day had been completed successfully. The absence of a mark meant something unfinished. The message the day you came back was not an explanation, but a label. I opened the calendar to previous months and saw entire pages filled. I found a key taped under the table with my name on it. The key opened a storage unit in the basement. Inside were boxes labeled in my handwriting with dates. The boxes contained printed photos from the camera showing me awake at night performing tasks with careful focus. There was no sign of anyone else. One box held a journal describing a period when I could not be trusted to remember. It explained that I had left to break a pattern and returned to finish it. The journal stated that fear would appear once awareness returned. It advised following the schedule until the last day. I flipped to the end and saw today circled without a mark. The instructions said restraint would be necessary to avoid interference. I understood then why the tape had been used. I climbed the stairs back to the apartment, carrying the boxes. The hallway lights flickered and stopped. Inside my apartment, the chair was already positioned. The calendar waited open on the table. I sat down and read the final instruction written beneath the message. It said completion requires acknowledgement. I wrote the red mark myself with a steady hand. The clock ticked once more and then stopped. I stood up unbound without remembering how. The trash bags were gone and the apartment looked ready. I checked my reflection and saw no confusion there. The logs on my laptop updated with a final entry saved under my name. It stated that the return was successful. I placed the calendar back on the wall and closed the month. The quiet returned to normal levels and the doors unlocked. I understood that the incident on the floor was a controlled re-entry rather than an attack. I had prepared my own absence to fix what routine could not. The last thing I did was delete the videos because they were no longer needed. I left the apartment for work on time. The elevator mirror showed a person who knew where she was going. At the street level, the air felt ordinary and undeserving of attention. My coworkers greeted me without hesitation. My emails were already sent because they had been scheduled weeks earlier. I followed the day as outlined in the final log. Lunch happened at the same place and time as before. No one noticed anything unusual. The sense of being observed was gone because the observer had stepped forward. I returned home that evening to an apartment that required no corrections. The calendar remained marked and still. I cooked a meal from memory and washed the dishes immediately. The chair was back under the table. The knife was returned to the block. The towel hung dry where it belonged. I slept through the night without interruption. In the morning, there were no notes. I searched for the camera and found it dismantled and packed away. The storage boxes in the basement were gone. The logs on my laptop had been archived. I felt an urge to open them, but resisted because the plan had ended. Days passed without red marks accumulating. I began to believe the system had worked. Then a week later, I found a new calendar delivered in the mail without a return address. It was the same brand I always used. The current month was already marked in red up to yesterday. Today was clean again. At the bottom of the page, the same message appeared. I checked my bank account and saw new scheduled charges. I searched my laptop and found a new folder titled Maintenance. The entries described minor adjustments and preventive measures. They mentioned preparing for a brief absence. I realized the process was not a single event, but a cycle. The incident on the floor had been a checkpoint. The return was temporary by design. I read deeper into the entries and saw references to risk assessment. They described moments when awareness became inefficient. The solution was controlled removal and return. The writing was still mine. I looked around the apartment and noticed supplies restocked quietly. The tape was back under the sink. The cleaning solution was full. I stood at the calendar and considered leaving again on my own terms. The schedule did not require consent. It required compliance. I marked today with red to see what would happen. Nothing changed immediately. That night, I stayed awake to catch the transition. At 3 in the morning, my phone powered off by itself. The lights dimmed briefly and returned. I did not move from the bed. In the morning, the calendar had another mark I did not remember making. The message at the bottom had changed slightly. It now read the day you stayed. The logs updated to note resistance. They advised a stronger reset. I packed a bag to leave, but found my keys missing. The locks engaged automatically. The elevator did not respond. I was not being trapped by someone else. I was following a protocol I had designed to override hesitation. I sat at the table and read the earliest entries again. They described a time when mistakes accumulated quietly. They described damage that did not show until it was severe. The system was created to prevent that outcome. The calendar was the interface. The red marks were confirmations of compliance. The clean day was the handoff point. I realized the horror was not intrusion, but continuity. I had optimized myself out of agency. The shocking incident on the floor was a safety feature meant to reassert control. I understood now why fear had been anticipated and documented. It was an expected side effect of awareness. The system did not value comfort. It valued function. I could stop it only by dismantling every layer, including memory aids and routines. That would require chaos. The entries warned against chaos explicitly. They described what happened the last time it was attempted. There were photographs of damage I did not remember causing. There were receipts for repairs paid in cash. There were apologies drafted but never sent. The calendar existed because forgetting was safer than remembering. I stood there deciding whether to accept the next absence. The message at the bottom of the page changed again without my hand touching it. It now read the day you agreed. I laughed once because it was accurate. I picked up the pen and marked the day. The apartment felt complete. The logs scheduled the next return weeks from now. I prepared the supplies efficiently. I cleaned the apartment until it matched the photos. I set the chair and placed the tape where it belonged. I wrote a final note to myself, explaining nothing. The instruction was to trust the system. When the transition began, I lay down on the kitchen floor calmly. The smell of cleaning solution was intentional. The phone was placed in the drawer. The door locked from the inside. The calendar waited open. I knew that I would wake up confused later. I knew that I would believe someone else had done this. I knew that I would read the message and feel dread. That dread was part of the design to ensure compliance. The cycle would continue because it worked. The revelation was not that someone had returned. The revelation was that I had never left.